Do you think that God is unfair? Do you think Jesus is unfair? Well, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's a story that came straight out of the lips of Jesus that pretty much proves that according to our value system, God is unfair. Now, I don't want to take this story out of context, so let me tell you the context of the story. Jesus is walking along and he's with his disciples, and he meets up with a young, rich man. This young, rich man approaches Jesus and he says, "How can I have eternal life? How can I become part of your kingdom?" And so Jesus and this young man have a discussion, and it soon becomes obvious that this man is a very clean living, good living kind of bloke. But Jesus says to him, "One thing you lack." He says, "Go and sell everything that you own, give it to the poor, and then come and follow me." See, Jesus' challenge realised that this man lacked one thing, and that is that he wasn't putting God first in his life. He was chasing other things. So that was the point of the challenge. The challenge, though, was too great for this young man, and he turns around and he just goes. And as he goes, Jesus says those iconic words. He says, "It is harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle." Now, his disciples are standing around him, and some of them are rich. For example, we're told of some women that were following him. There was Mary, there was Joanna, and there was Susanna. Joanna, for example, her husband ran the household of King Herod. So, she was a wealthy woman. In fact, all these three women must have been wealthy because the Bible tells us that they were bankrolling Jesus and his disciples. They were sort of the money that was supporting them as they went around doing all this work and this teaching that they were doing. Not only that, the disciples themselves, some of them still owned boats and still owned houses. And they were thinking, well, we haven't sold everything, so who can be saved? And Jesus says, well, for man it's impossible, but for God it's possible. Peter then says, well, hang on a sec. We might not have sold everything, but we've left everything in order to follow you. What will we get then? What's in it for us? Now, Jesus turns to Peter and the disciples and he tells them specifically what they're going to get, but then he broadens it out and he says, whoever leaves houses or family or fields for my sake, well, they'll get 100-fold in return. But then he adds something. He says, but many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. And then he starts to tell the parable. And the parable, the story that Jesus told, goes like this. It's about a guy who owns a vineyard, and undoubtedly there's times in a vineyard growing where you need a lot of workers. And so at 6 a.m. in the morning, this guy goes down to the marketplace. He sees a group of men and he says, come on. He says, will you work for my place? I'll pay you a denarius if you come and work for me today. Now, a denarius was a good wage. It was the wage the Romans paid a Roman soldier for a day's work. So they jump at it. Yes, we'll work. And off they go to the man's vineyard. He still needs more workers. So he goes down there at 9 a.m. and he sees a group of workers there, people looking for work. And he says, well, you come and work in my vineyard. I'll pay you whatever is right. Well, they're keen for work, and so off they go and they work in the vineyard. He does the same thing at midday, at 3 p.m, and even at 5 p.m. The working day finishes at 6 p.m. So everyone comes together and he starts to hand out the pay. The people who are turned up at 5 and had only worked an hour, guess how much he pays them? A denarius. And then he pays the other people a denarius. In fact, he pays all of the people a denarius. And I'm sure if you were one of the people that had turned up at 6 a.m. and worked a 12-hour shift, and you saw these guys who had turned up and had only worked for an hour, getting the same pay, you'd be saying like these people said. In Jesus' story, they complained. They said, this is unfair. We've worked the whole day and we get the same amount of money. And the owner turns to them and he says, what was our contract? Didn't I say I'd pay you a denarius and you've now got a denarius? So we're sweet. These people, what does it matter what I pay them? It's my money. Are you going to hold it against me because I'm generous? You see, the man's values weren't the values that we have in our Western culture. I know, having worked in industrial relations, that would have been dynamite to do something like that in an Australian workforce. And yet he did it. Then Jesus says at the end of this story, he says, many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. Now, I think you've got to agree. In this instance, if this is an example of what God's like, we too will say unfair. His values are not our values. But let me tell you, I am so glad that he is unfair in this situation. Because look at me. I mean, I'm no Billy Graham. I'm no Apostle Paul. I'm just a retired old man in the suburbs of an Australian city. I mean, look at this video. Check how many views it gets. Check my channel, how many followers I have. I mean, I am but a tiny, insignificant person. And yet Jesus invites me to be part of his kingdom. I have the confidence that he loves me, cares for me, and I'm going to be part of his wonderful kingdom. What about you? What are you doing? Are you so busy chasing up other things, maybe wealth or maybe, I don't know what it is that you're chasing, but there's one thing for certain, even though you're a good person, God isn't first in your life. Then what Jesus said, someone like me who you're much better than and probably should be last is now going to be first. And you who probably should be first could end up being last. Don't be last about the most important thing in life. Don't walk away from Jesus. Don't put your priorities so that he's last, so that you become last. Put him first so you'll be first. If you want to know more about Jesus, then give us a hoy in the comments below. If you like this video, give me a like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And as well as that, join me as I look at some of the other parables of Jesus. They're really interesting. God bless.